Okay, let's open in a word of prayer. Lord, we just pray that you'll be with us today. Thank you for the wonderful day. We pray that you'll give us wisdom, discernment to understand the times in which we live. And we just also pray for the situation in the Middle East, that we know that we look forward to the day of your Son's return to establish peace there, but we also pray for peace now. To the extent that that is possible. But in all things, we pray that the Lord, that you would be glorified in everything. Bless us today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, you might notice today we're going to talk a little bit about the Middle East. I do have just a few things to say in the intro. Again, this is this thing that I talk about each week: acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. And so we see a lot of things coming together. I don't think we're at the point where we can say this is that which was prophesied by the prophets. I was talking to Pam on the way in. You know, it was 6 days ago that we had a total eclipse here in Ohio. It was very nice for God to create the universe so that before I passed on, I would get to see at least one total eclipse, and it would be at my house, and I could sit in my backyard and look at it. But it's very cool. I mean, especially at the point of totality. I didn't know I had that many neighbors, to be honest with you, because when it went total, everybody was ooh and ah and clapping and all this stuff. And I saw people I'd never seen before. We've lived there for almost 4 years. And of course, they're all working jobs, kids in school. And we have a couple houses in our neighborhood that we drive by all the time. It's like, we've never seen anybody at those houses but more than once or twice in 4 years. It's kind of crazy. So I'm sure they're not a vacation home in Ohio. Maybe they have a vacation home someplace else. But that was very, very unique experience. It's a once in a lifetime thing. And I would just tell people, if you ever have a chance to go someplace where there's a total eclipse, go. By the way, I do have 2 pair of eclipse glasses. They're very nice, and they're lightly used. They've only been used for about 20 minutes. And I'm willing to sell those for the next eclipse in 2044, which will be down in Florida and the southeast United States, at least here in the United States. There'll be other ones around the world, I'm sure. But and there was, as you know, I've talked about it, there was a lot of speculation about what the eclipse means, and certainly there are a bunch of coincidences that occur. I'm not sure that I'm not convinced that it's prophetic. Despite the admonitions that I need to get on board with God's plan from some people in the comments last week, look, that a eclipse happens is a miracle. Because that moon is a certain size and the sun is much, much bigger, but it's perfectly positioned so that there can be a total eclipse. And when you think that these things are racing through space while this is going on, that it happens at all is just an absolute miracle. And we did have, fortunately, it was a little high clouds, but you could clearly see everything. And that was great. So today we're going to talk about the Middle East. Again, we have this verse that I reference a lot about the fact that Daniel wanted to know when the things that he was writing prophecy about were going to take place. And he was told, Daniel, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Now, there's a lot of people that argue that the time of the end was, well, when John came along and wrote Revelation, that was at the time of the end, and we've always been in the end times. I don't agree with that. I think it's at the end, and we're going to see these. And it also says here in Daniel chapter 12, but many shall be purified, made white, and refined. But the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. So I think we're living at this time where we're going to see more of these things happening as we move closer. And this is another thing, that Jerusalem will be a cup of trembling, a cup of reeling for all peoples. And then we also have this situation involving the seals and the horses. I think that, and my graph represents time going forward and increasing in intensity. I think that they overlap as they're unfolding and that type of thing. Now, and at some point, there's this final beast empire that's set up. And somebody sent me a very interesting comment this week, and I'm sort of noodling on it a bit, that the four horsemen they're what come together to form this final beast empire. And I think there's some truth to that. And then we'll get into the seal and trumpet judgments at some point. So I'm going to look at a couple things that are going on in the world that I think are important, that indicate some very difficult times ahead. For example, this is an article from the Wall Street Journal that talks about the fact that essentially the title could be St. Louis is dying. I used to play golf with a guy whose father owned a bunch of real estate, lots and lots of real estate in downtown St. Louis. And this is true everywhere. I was talking to some bankers yesterday. I haven't been to downtown Columbus, where I worked for most of my career. And they say there's a lot of closed storefronts, second floors are open, office buildings are empty. In St. Louis, there's an AT&T building. I think it's the tallest building in St. Louis. It's 44 stories tall. It's completely empty. Around 2010, that building sold for about $280 million. It's sold within the last year for $3.5 million. This is happening all over the place, and this has not been priced into the real estate market, a commercial real estate market. The banks have not really accounted for this. And when it hits, there's going to be a major banking crisis, particularly among regional commercial banks. Now, there are some very large banks, and some think that the collapse will result in these 3 to 6 very large banks like JP Morgan Chase and others coming in and taking over these banks and picking up the commercial real estate assets as collateral for loans, and they'll get it at a discount. And they will make a lot of money. At one point in my career, I represented a bank funded by a certain notorious investor. I learned much later, and we would do the workout on real estate loans, and the bank made a lot of money. And I'm talking like way above 9 figures in 1 year profit. So there's profit to be made, and of course the big banks are going to be marching in or looking to get that. This is an issue we did a roundtable this week. Scott Townsend, Britt Gillette, Patrick Wood, and myself about AI technology, some financial things, and we didn't even scratch the surface. We had an outline. I doubt that we got through 20% of it in 2 hours and 15 minutes, but we'll be having more roundtables in the future. But we talked a lot about AI, and the development in AI and the speed with which this is going is absolutely stunning. Now, I have way more to say about AI than I'm going to say today, but there is a concern that AI could go rogue, that it may reach a point where it's not able to be controlled. And it's not crazy Bible prophecy guys that are talking about this. It's the people that are involved in the development of AI, the rollout of AI, and they're the ones who are sounding the alarm. And a lot of people say, well, the government will step in and control it. Folks, that's not going to happen. It hasn't happened. People have been talking about it for a year and a half, at least. Well, at least since ChatGPT rolled out in late November of 2022. And how many laws have been enacted? They're putting some in. But if we have a lovely family here today from Sri Lanka, and what if Sri Lanka becomes the center of AI computer development because they don't have any restrictions on the development of AI? I'm not saying that Sri Lanka would do that, but I'm just using that as one country, a relatively small country that could allow that to happen. They won't regulate it. And so where do you think the AI people are going to go? They're going to go there. And do you think that countries would want all this AI and tech and money and that type of thing in their country, where it's going to employ people? Yeah. Now, one of the problems with AI right now, in the concern, by the way, I saw an article, and I'll be doing more AI in my updates in the future. I want to focus mostly on the Mideast, and I'll get to that shortly. Just relax. It's not going anywhere right now, I don't think. It's one of those ones where I think I did a live update last night because I was talking to Brian Schrager called me and goes, there's missiles exploding all over my house here. He lives south of Jerusalem. So I thought, okay, well, let's go live about 2 o'clock in the morning there. And it just was one of those things. And these things happen, what do we say, gradually then suddenly. And so the title today, No Longer What If, relates to the fact it's no longer what if Iran attacks Israel directly. That happened. That's not happened previously. This is a first. And it could be, I guess you could call it a game changer. So anyway, back to AI. AI, one of the problems is that it needs power. It needs electricity. So this is an article in the Wall Street Journal on yesterday. AI can solve its own power problem. And how are they going to solve the AI power problem? They're going to ask AI how to solve the AI power problem. And they think AI will tell it. Microsoft is making proposals. There's Bill Gates, not necessarily a favorite around here, has bought a lot of farmland just in the county to the west, Franklin County, downtown Columbus, about 50,000 acres, and he's come out with a proposal. He's going to put a solar farm out there on good farmland on 4,500 acres. And by the way, the whole New Albany development was like 5,000 acres. So it's like the size of New Albany is going to be solar panels. Now, what's he going to do with that? And why doesn't he want to grow stuff on there? And he believes that wind and solar, that's going to be the answer for mankind to get the transition away from what's wrongly called, I think, fossil fuels. That's what they call them. I don't think they're fossil fuels. I personally think it comes from a process in the earth. It's not dead dinosaurs necessarily. And that raises a whole host of questions too. Will we ever really run out of oil? Well, we may run out of being able to pump enough oil if we deplete what's there. So that's a big issue right now. Everybody's concerned about that. But AI needs power. And so Microsoft is currently engaged. There was a report a few months ago that Microsoft was building infrastructure at a rate that very few countries in human history have built at that rate. Microsoft, one company, to build out the infrastructure and data centers. And they're spending tens and hundreds of billions of dollars on this. They're committed. And they are training a large language model, AI, a separate section of AI, to figure out how to be able to build small nuclear power plants more quickly. Now, those things are way overregulated in my opinion, and nuclear power is, if you're really concerned about the environment, you should be all for nuclear power. But they're thinking like, well, we can build a small nuclear power plant to power the data centers, because there's a concern even around here with all these data centers, is the power grid sufficient to do things like, power for homes as opposed to the power for the data centers. So Microsoft is doing that, and they say they can devise ways to get around and make energy usage more efficient. I guess why didn't they just install those stupid smart meters that they want to put in everybody's house? And do you get this, by the way? Like, you get these energy reports now, like your energy usage and how you compare to everybody around you, and how, so our score was bad, I guess, because we do things like air conditioning and refrigeration and computers. And they say, you're using more power than 80% of your neighbors. Well, part of the reason is some of them are never around. That's one reason why they're not using power. But that's a big issue. This is something from a Cambridge University. They want them to pledge that they'll do everything with their Master's in Business Administration, their MBA, to promote clean energy. You know, and you see how they're training them to do this. I thought this was a good graphic. The electric vehicle market is not doing well. There were reports of 17-hour traffic jams of people leaving places where you could see the eclipse. It was fine in my backyard, but we drove past the freeway a couple times hours later, and it was still bumper to bumper. And I heard that some people were stuck in traffic jams for 17 hours in some places. Because so many people, I think people had left Pittsburgh and drove up to Erie. And the roads just didn't have the capacity to either get up there or get back all at once. And there were people with electric vehicles that ran out of juice. And you're kind of out there in the middle of nowhere. What do? It's a problem. So the electric vehicle market right now is collapsing. Prices are dropping and that sort of thing. Now, transgender. There are huge things going on in this space, and the news is good. In Europe, a lot of countries are banning the use of puberty blockers in children. Finally. Because first of all, and there was a big report from the NHS in the UK saying, we don't know what these things are going to do. They're bad. We don't know what the long-term effects are. Like, isn't this what everybody's been, in the conservative side of this, has been saying for years? You people are out of your minds giving these to kids. You're out of your minds giving them to anybody, but kids that are developing. And there's an industry, and you talk to some doctors, and how many of you have been to the doctor recently, and you get the form, and it's like, what? What sex do you identify as? Well, I should say it's still under review. Maybe that's what I should start saying when I get those. There was a stabbing, I don't know if it's terror related, in Sydney, Australia. 6 people were killed, mother, young child, baby, 9-month-old baby. Very tragic. As he went around this big shopping mall, and you can find the videos of him running around. Here's another from the Times of London today. Physically healthy and still choosing euthanasia, age 33. Why? Because she's depressed. And they're doing it. That's a picture of the lady there. I have a big problem with this. Now, this is going to be a big issue in the election this year, abortion. And I know everybody's going to say, well, I thought Roe versus Wade got overturned. You haven't seen the half of it yet. Because that was the goal of getting Roe versus Wade overturned, was to return the abortion legislation to the states. And the Democrats are using it. They're using it as a wedge issue, and they've had 50 years of indoctrinating people that Roe versus Wade, right of privacy, a woman's right to choose, is the way to go. Now, I will confess, I'm sort of, Pam will confirm this, I like these pregnancy reveal videos that you see on YouTube. You know, they're telling their parents, we're having a baby, or we're having twins, or we're having triplets or quadruplets. And what do? They have pregnancy reveal, and what else do they have? Gender reveal parties. And they say, it's a boy, it's a girl, it's a boy and a girl, it's 2 boys and a girl, or whatever the combination is. They don't say 3 question marks, do they? And then when people come in to see the baby after it's born, they're like, is it a boy or a girl? Because that's the way humans have done things since the beginning of human history, and we're trying to change it. And so when you look in Daniel and you see these statements in Daniel that the Antichrist, this son of perdition, this last world ruler, will come along to try to change laws and seasons, you're seeing how you can see right in front of your eyes, right in front of your face, how that's going to change. So now in abortion, what happened, after Roe versus Wade, everybody said, well, in the pro-life movement, they were striking down all the laws that the pro-life movement was able to get passed through legislature. So the pro-life movement started compromising and say, we can get this law through with these particular restrictions. So that's what they did. So for example, in Arizona, they enacted an abortion ban after a certain period of time, 16 weeks or 20 weeks or whatever it was. You couldn't get an abortion after that period of time. Well, when they enacted those legislations, they didn't go back and say, do we have any more restrictive laws already on the books that would ban abortion completely? Well, it turns out in Arizona, they have such a law. It was enacted in 1864. Arizona wasn't a state in 1864. Anyway, the law in the books was enacted in 1864. And it says no abortion. So, Kari Lake, who's running as a Republican for Senate, what did she do? When I'm governor, we're going to enforce that law. Katie Hobbs, the lady who defeated her for governor last year, a Democrat, came out and said, I'm going to do everything I can to prevent that law from being enforced. Oh, so you don't really care about the law, do you, Katie Hobbs? And so here, this was like a gift to the pro-life movement, would you agree? And a law banning abortion in the state. So what Kari Lake said, well, we got to get something more reasonable in place. I heard Charlie Kirk from Turning Point USA. He came out and he said the same thing. We will lose the presidential election if we allow the Arizona law to stand. And so they went into the legislature to do it, and the Republicans refused to do it. The Democrats were crying shame, 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 and that type of thing. And now a lot of Republicans are concerned about what's going on because they think that it's going to cause them votes and they'll lose the election. And that could be a very reasonable calculus as to what's going to happen. It might also be, though, that if you do stand for that, which I think is the true biblical value, that God might bless your candidate. Have you factored that in, or do you think God can't do that? I don't know. I'm troubled by it. Okay, and the Babylon Bee took after Kari Lake, and now she's upset with the Babylon Bee. And she said Babylon Bee, I don't know, she said Babylon Bee is fake news. Well, Babylon Bee is based on satire and not real stuff. But the problem is real life now is so weird that the Babylon Bee can't even make up something that you might believe a little bit. Satire is losing its impact. So here's this. This is from the UK again, back to the puberty blockers. NHS review rejects use of puberty blockers. I want you to see this. This is an Oregon State track meet with a person who identifies as a woman competing against girls. Here we go.
Wilhelmina, Jaden Vanderveen. In 7 for Oregon Episcopal, Abby Wilson.
In the red here.
Out very well is Gallagher, McDaniel in lane 2. We're going to see Gallagher later on in the relays. Great knees, great drive.
Quickly, ladies, quickly.
Gallagher, the victory here in section number 1.
Just barely got through there, right? So in the UK, when they're fighting this, J.K. Rowling has come out and said, I'm not going to put up with this. This is nonsense. This is insane. I don't support this transgender stuff. And the NCAA and other things will say, well, we got to figure out a way to allow these people to compete against girls. Why do you have to do that? You're tearing down the values and structure of society. That's the goal. The NAIA, the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics, which is mostly small colleges, a lot of religious schools, they had to decide, are we going to allow people particularly boys who claimed born boys, raised boys, but now they say they're girls, to compete against girls in intercollegiate athletics in the NAIA-sponsored competition. And the governing committee of the NAIA, to their credit, voted 20-0 and said, no way. So, if you want to protect your girl, send her to an NAIA school. They have good athletic programs. They're smaller colleges. I went to an NAIA school myself. But in the UK, J.K. Rowling is standing up, and she's being lambasted, and they have this ridiculous hate crime law in Scotland that if you misgender a person, in other words, you say this person was born a boy, that's misgendering, that's a hate crime, and you could go to prison for up to a year for doing that. And in the first 24, 48 hours after that law became effective on April 1st, the police handled 3,800 complaints. So you think, just wait till something like that comes to America, and you think the FBI showing up at people's doors right now is going to do that? By the way, on the election dispute that we had a couple of years, 3.5 years ago, the Supreme Court's holding a hearing this week as to whether now I know this is hard for you to believe, but it appears, at least the argument is, that the federal government, the Biden administration, the Biden Department of Justice, under the direction of Joe Biden and Merrick Garland and whoever else works for the Biden administration, may have been misapplying the law to get people convicted. Now, I know that's hard to believe that they're doing that, but there are dozens and dozens of people who've been convicted under this particular statute that was enacted to prevent the destruction of documents, to kind of give you less difficult questions to answer when you have a hearing in front of Congress. They took that law, was enacted after Enron debacle, and they destroyed companies that advised Enron for no reason at all. They did not care. This is the way, and so there's these laws enacted, and they took that law and they applied it to these people who protested. So the Supreme Court's having oral arguments this week. You might want to get on the Supreme Court website. Okay, so let's talk about Israel. So I'm going to talk at least first about Gaza. Then we're going to talk about some of the things that led up to what happened last night. So I will get to last night. And it was spectacular, and it was comforting in the sense that Israel completely repelled the attack. I mean, completely. It was unprecedented attack by Iran, and it was unprecedented success in this type of warfare. So, very good news. But it doesn't mean there's going to be a problem. So we've just passed, it was last Sunday, we passed the 6th month. This was an article, I may have made a brief reference to it last week, about, this was from the Wall Street Journal, in 6 months everything has changed for Israel. And it has. People, I know a lot of people there, I've interviewed a lot of people, talked to them regularly, have them on my Israel updates that I try to do regularly. Things have dramatically changed in Israel. I have friends who were, I don't think he's going, by the way, Olivier Melnick, who's going to be here in 2 weeks. He's going to speak on Saturday at, was it 3:30, I think? He's going to, 3 o'clock? Okay. Nobody tells me anything, so, or I don't remember. So 3 o'clock Saturday, the 27th, and he's going to talk about a Passover Seder and maybe something else, take up about 2 hours. And then Sunday morning, he's going to talk first hour, and then second hour, he and I are going to do a joint update live here on that Sunday. So you won't get to hear me much that Sunday. I'm going to try to let Olivier do a lot of the talking. I know that's hard for me. So I'll be going through shock therapy and that type of thing to get myself trained for that. So listen, Israel has done very well in Gaza. They've eliminated all but about one of the Hamas battalions. They have one left in Rafah. Here's some statistics. 604, and this may have changed, 604 Israeli service people dead. And I believe that number includes the 300 to 350 killed on October 7th. And everybody that was talking about this, people I was talking to, leadership in Israel thought that when they went into Gaza, they would lose somewhere between 8 to 18,000 soldiers. They've lost, really, since the battle there started, not much over 250. That seems to be almost miraculous, but it's very difficult. As Avraham Levine told me in a recent interview, I think the first interview I did with him, it's very difficult. He served in Gaza with the Golani Brigade. The interviews on our YouTube channel, he said, listen, this was, you clear an area and you go back 20 minutes later and 3 guys pop up out of nowhere and attack you with an RPG or hand grenade or weapons or something like that, because they come from the tunnels. So Israel might control the surface, they don't control the tunnels, and it's very difficult to figure out how do we get rid of these tunnels. They don't want to flood them because they don't want to kill the hostages. So in the ceasefire, hostage release negotiations that have been going on back and forth, Hamas always rejects anything other than a total ceasefire, which is really a surrender of Israel and allows them to remain in power. It's contrary to Israel's main goal is to eradicate Hamas. So they said, okay, in the most recent round of negotiations, said we want 40 people to be released. Last week, early Sunday morning, I may have mentioned this last week, they withdrew all ground troops from Gaza. They've left a few special forces people there, but pretty much withdrew everyone. So now the question is, why did they do that? Are they capitulating? Are they backing off? Or are they resting the troops and getting ready and regrouping and doing some training to make the final push on Rafah? I don't know. The problem is there's no soldiers virtually anywhere. And with the tunnel system still intact, a lot of those Hamas people may be making their way back north through that tunnel system. And that's a problem. I don't know what the answer is, but they withdrew everybody. And so a lot of people in Israel are really upset, really mad. And a lot of people are really happy because they think, well, we're not going to fight anymore in Gaza, and finally we're going to get out of this. But in the negotiations, they wanted 40 women, children infirm. They gave them a list. And Hamas came back, look, it says the IDF believes that raids based on new intelligence. That's not the one that I wanted. Here it is. Tragic news. Channel 12 Israel News. Hamas has told the mediators on the hostage negotiations that it does not have 40 hostages in the humanitarian category that are still alive. That is a category of women, children, the elderly, and the sick. The number that they say is alive, which is significantly lower, has not been made public. This, of course, is a serious obstacle for the ceasefire talks that seem to be progressing. We don't know if we even have 40 hostages. And the concern in Israel now is, and some of these hostages may have died in friendly fire situations. It's war. This is what it happens. And Hamas is banking on it. And Hamas doesn't care. They don't care about their own people. If you've heard the casualty statistic, it's always been 30, 31,000, 32,000 dead. And if you notice, it really hasn't changed for over a month now. Now, why is that? Well, now Hamas is kind of coming out and saying, well, it might only really be 21,000. And if Israel's correct that they've killed 16,000 Hamas terrorists out of 21,000, that means there's even fewer civilians, fewer women, fewer children killed, and the ratio of civilian casualties to fighter terrorist casualties is easily the best of any war like this in human history. Now, are you going to see things led with at, say, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and other places? No, you're not going to hear that. Remember back to the hospital when a rocket hit, they said the rocket hit Al-Shifa Hospital and 500 are dead. Within like 20 minutes, less than 20 minutes of this thing hitting. How did they count all those people in the rubble? And then it turned out the hospital wasn't in rubble, it was part of the parking lot. And I think there's pretty good proof now that nobody was killed in that attack, and the attack happened because a rocket fired by Hamas or another terrorist organization in Gaza, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, fell short in the parking lot and caused the injuries. But the New York Times and everybody ran with the story immediately because Hamas told us it was 500. And Hamas is going to use a big number because if they say, well, you know, 2 people lost their car in the parking lot, that's not really going to persuade the world. And it's the old saying, the lie will go around the world twice before, well, the truth is still getting its pants on, or something like that. So this is article in the Washington Post. It was an editorial, and it came from King Abdullah II of Jordan, Emmanuel Macron of France, and Abdel Fattah el-Sisi of Egypt. And it said, 3 nations, 1 message, a permanent Gaza ceasefire now. Look at some of the things that they say in this. We emphasize the necessity of respecting the historical and legal status at Jerusalem's Muslim and Christian holy sites and the role of the Jordanian Waqf under the Hashemite custodianship. This is the usual line of King Abdullah of Jordan. Do you notice what he never says when he's talking about holy sites in Jerusalem? Never says it. If you have a tape of him saying it, I'd love to see it. And maybe he has. I'm not going to completely exclude the possibility. But I watch him every time he talks about it. The Muslim and Christian holy sites. Well, how about the Jewish holy sites? There are a few of those around Jerusalem, around Israel, around Judea, around Samaria, and that type of thing. And he seems to never acknowledge it. Now, listen, he's married to a Palestinian lady. About 75% of his country is Palestinians. So that's an issue. We stress our determination. These are the 3 presidents. We stress our determination to step up our joint efforts to effectively bring about the 2-state solution, the establishment of an independent sovereign Palestinian state on the basis of the 2-state solution in accordance with international law and relevant UN Security Council resolutions to live side by side in peace and security with Israel is the only way to achieve true peace. And I would say, how long have we been hearing this? And you think that Hamas is a partner? Well, a lot of people in Israel thought that they had Hamas under control. That's proven to be not a very tenable position. And it's people in the, even in the Shin Bet. I think I saw it, and I don't want to, I'm pretty sure it was a guy who was one of the heads of the Shin Bet security service in Israel. And he said, well, we never thought Hamas was under control, but then people started pulling out all kinds of speeches and other talks where he gave. He says, well, we think we have Hamas under control. Well, so everybody is, what's the technical legal term for it? Covering their backsides with the way they're going about these talks and everything. So they want to do the 2-state solution, sovereign Palestinian state. And what does Hamas and the Palestinian Authority and Fatah, they pay terrorists who've killed people. By the way, the money they get in large part comes from U.S. tax dollars, or from U.S. taxpayers. We pay the money, our government sends it over there, and they pay it to terrorists. And it's a scandal. And you can bet that the Biden administration is not going to do anything about it. So over the past few weeks, leading up to the other night, Iran has been pushing, saying we're gonna take care of Israel. We're gonna get rid of Israel. Even our State Department, which seems to have an affinity, this is an editorial in the Wednesday Wall Street Journal about Anthony Blinken's ahistorical advice for Israel. I'll summarize the article. Anthony Blinken doesn't have a clue about what he's talking about most of the time. That's a sort of a summary of the editorial. Written by John Seymour, by the way. He's somebody you should look up and follow. I think he did an interview recently with Caroline Glick where he analyzed the Hamas casualty statistics. And so there's this narrative out there that we can do a two-state solution. Hamas is not a problem. We can deal with them. We can deal with the Palestinian Authority. We can deal with Fatah. And it's all a bunch of nonsense. This is from Iran International, which is a not pro-Iranian regime organization. And here they are saying, and people are upset. The Iranian people are upset with their regime. You guys haven't responded to Israel. And they're upset with Russia. They're upset with Syria. You guys aren't helping us out. You're not supporting us. You're not attacking Israel. They're railing against Turkey. Turkey, you're allowing gas shipments that come across Turkey, natural gas to be, or oil, maybe it is, that comes from Azerbaijan, to be transferred to Israel. You need to cut them off. You need to stop them. And everybody's upset with everybody else. This was a meeting this week. Russia's Foreign Minister Lavrov spoke with his Iranian counterpart and condemned the Israeli attack on the Iranian consulate in Damascus amid regional tensions. In Tehran, they have, this was in the Tehran Times the other day, this is the side of a building. And it's in a place called, in English we would call it Palestinian Square. In Persian, it's, in Farsi, it's Philistinian Square. Philistinian, because that's where the name, when it was made up, came from. And it permeated itself through all these cultures and languages across the Middle East. And nobody remembers that. And look, Christian Bibles are wrong. I don't have a beef with him on his study Bible. MacArthur Study Bible has a Thomas Nelson map in the back, and it says Palestine in the time of Christ. It wasn't called that in the time of Christ. That never came about till 200 years later. So this myth that there was always this Palestine kind of gets ingrained. And the people who really created the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian narrative was an organization called the KGB from Russia back in 1964. It's very well documented. So here's a poster that from Press TV. Whoops, I don't know if this is a video. Hang on here. I guess not. That's just came from a screenshot from a video. Here's a little bit that happened in Iran as they were celebrating Al-Quds Day, which is Jerusalem Day. And when you see them celebrating this, all of these videos, posters, media always center around the Dome of the Rock, the Golden Dome. And so here's Khamenei speaking last week. We're going to come after Israel. We're going to get them. We're going to defeat the Zionist entity. Leading prayers. And of course, there was the funeral on Al-Quds Day for the martyrs. I think there's some quotes here from the Khamenei speech. He can draw a crowd. I'm not sure if they're all there voluntarily. This year, during the month of Ramadan, the bloodshed in Gaza has upset Muslims throughout the world. May God curse the usurping Zionist regime, he goes on to say. So this poster, though, is the missiles. This is in Palestinian Square in Tehran, and it has the missiles they're going to attack. And the sign at the top in Tehran is in Hebrew. And the black part, translation, I believe it's the black part, essentially says, "Are you ready for 2 million displaced persons?" Because Israel has a lot of displaced people. Israel Katz, the foreign minister of Israel, in response to Khamenei, said if Iran attacks from its territory, Israel will react and attack in Iran. So that's still an open question. What's Israel going to do to respond? Here's a little bit of that video that I played about the what if, some of the things that are going on in the north. And the potential attacks that can play. I'm not going to play it again. Remember, they talked about what happens in Israel. What happens if we have these attacks in the north? Listen to this guy from the Institute for Counterterrorism in Israel. They talk about power grids are going to go down. People are told to prepare for power being out for a while. This is Zarit Zahavi.
Once you don't have electricity, it's only a matter of hours or days, depends where.
Why you see Israel preparing for a few days of dark.
Once you don't have electricity, it's only a matter of hours or days, depends where you don't have water.
80% of the water we consume come from desalination infrastructures.
You don't have water, you don't have sewage. The water.
Well, for some reason my
of the
video
water
is stuck. It doesn't want to play. So that's an issue. There was also, this was Barak Ravid, who's a journalist who writes for some Israeli newspapers. He also writes for Axios. And a lot of people call him the White House stenographer because he always seems to have this inside information. So he wrote this the other day: senior U.S. general to visit Israel to coordinate on Iran attack threat. And here's a picture of him meeting at a air base. I believe this might have been at Nevatim Air Base down in the Negev. There was attacked last night. So they're talking about how we're going to get ready. This is the head of CENTCOM from the U.S. U.S. actually deployed some warships to the Middle East. Back in the Gulf War days, I think we had 16 aircraft carriers back in those days. We're now down to 11, but only about 3 or 4 of them are ever operational at one time. So we've really gone down. France actually sent a warship to the Middle East, a battle aircraft carrier. By the way, when they did this back when it was in the Gulf War days, they sent an aircraft carrier, but they had trucks on the flight deck. Now this time they have airplanes, so France seems to be coming around. Here's a little video from The Sun, which is a U.S. newspaper, about how this might unfold. This was 4 days ago. What might happen between Israel and Iran. It's kind of an interesting video. It's about 5 minutes long. Just watch this. A war simulation. How an apocalyptic battle between Iran and Israel could take place and start World War III. By the way, what they're talking about here is not really like out of the realm of possibility. And so when things started the other night, everybody thought, is this World War III starting? It might have been. We don't know. These things will play out over time. Israel hits back, but without U.S. ground support, eventually resorts to nuclear missiles, as Iran does. Syria and Lebanon would become a front line of sorts as Iran's proxies battle Israeli forces.
So Israel's foreign minister, Shalom Katz, actually gave a statement on Israeli radio today that said that if Iran should attack Israel, Israel will respond, and it will respond directly to the homeland, to Iran specifically. Now, he then went on and tweeted that message, tagging the Iranians. So it seems to be that Israel is very, very serious about that. I don't think that Israel can accept a direct attack upon its sovereign soil without responding in kind. And we do have the ability to do so according to foreign reports. For example, there are Israeli submarines in the Gulf that would put Iran squarely within range. And also, the State of Israel is reported to have a ballistic missile arsenal that has Iran within range as well. So Israel does have options at its disposal. We'll wait and see whether that is something upon which Israel calls. But I cannot see a scenario wherein the Iranians directly attack the State of Israel and the State of Israel responds merely by attacking and retaliating against Iranian proxies. It would have to, in a scenario of a direct attack from Iran, respond by attacking that.
Israel's prime minister said Israel's preparing for scenarios in other areas than Gaza. He said we are challenging times. We are in the midst of the war in Gaza, which continues in full force. At the same time, we continue our unceasing efforts to return our hostages. But we're also preparing for scenarios of challenges in other arenas, and we establish a simple principle: whoever hurts us, we hurt him. We're preparing to meet the security needs of the State of Israel, both in defense and in attack. I and the people of Israel trust you, and may we all have great success. And so leading up to this was the question, what's Iran going to do? How's Israel going to respond? So we know what Iran did.
So,
by the way, a few weeks ago, there was an article on April 3rd at MEMRI.org, MEMRI, a Middle East Media Research Institute, great article, Iran's grand plan, bring down the Jordanian regime, attack Israel from the east, and thwart the Western Sunni normalization project, like the Abraham Accords. And this could begin this Friday, Iran's Quds Day. So everybody was thinking, when are they going to attack? When are they going to attack? And they didn't. They waited almost 2 weeks from when this attack happened in Damascus on April the 1st and killed these 7 people. Alma Research has been talking about, by the way, you can go to MEMRI.org and you can find that article. It's by a guy named Savyon, Savyon. He's a Iran specialist at MEMRI. It's an excellent article, and it's very, very long. I could sit here and read it to you, but you would complain that it takes too long. So do your own homework. Go read the article, because it really lays out some of the issues with the Iranian regime. And one of the things they want to do is they want to get rid of Jordan, because they see Jordan as a potential problem. And it already is a transit point in some respects for weapons getting into what's called the West Bank, properly denominated as Judea and Samaria. They find these huge weapon caches every now and then, things that have been transferred in. So, and there's a lot that's gotten through that they haven't found, and it's a problem. There's a lot of violence going on. There was a young Jewish settler, I use that term as somebody who lives within the area of Judea and Samaria, shepherd. He disappeared and they found his body. In response to that, there's been some violence against Palestinian villages. People are upset. There were attacks this morning on the gates of Bethel in the Bible, one of the most important biblical sites, near where people that I know live, like Aaron Lipkin lives very close to there. So everything is on a knife's edge. Here's Jarit Zahavi was on MSNBC. Look at some of her quotes. What was most remarkable about the statement by Jordanian King Abdullah, he's referring to that letter that was published in the Washington Post earlier this week. French President Emmanuel Macron and al-Sisi was that it lacked any reference to Hamas or Hezbollah. The absence of the word Hamas in this letter is no coincidence. Is indicative of the international community's systematic attempt to ignore, downplay, or outright appease jihadist terrorist forces and the hope that this can somehow make the problem go away and to conveniently place the focus on Israel. As the Washington Post statement indicates, the discourse in the international community is mostly about how to pressure Israel into endless concessions in the face of Hamas. The fact that the free world is asleep at the wheel, the fact is that the free world is asleep at the wheel. This is what has enabled Hezbollah to abuse Lebanon, for Hamas to turn Gaza into the world's largest terrorist base, and for Iran to operate with impunity to destabilize the Middle East and beyond. And Alma has this thing about the potential threats in the north and where the rockets, guided missiles might fly. This is an organization called INSS, Institute for National Security Studies. By the way, you have to understand their orientation. Their orientation is really, I think, that what allowed Hamas to stay in place. They were all on board with that. We can control Hamas. But you see here, they have the casualties, the deaths, how many hostages, internally displaced Israelis, 123,000. On the left, you see the displaced communities on the Lebanon border. On the right, you see the displaced communities on the Israeli border. A number of rockets fired into Israel since this started, over 12,000. They also have Lebanon and Syria. Number of Lebanese evacuated. You see the box there, the next last one there to the right. 90,000 Lebanese evacuated. Missiles fired from Syria or Lebanon, 3,000. Israeli communities evacuated, 43. This is in the north, and then they have this for West Bank and Jerusalem. 20 Israelis murdered, that's now 20, at least 21, 420 terrorists killed, and 3,700 detained. That's a lot of people in a relatively small area, 3,700. I mean, think of the big prisons that you see around here that might have 2,000 people in them. That's like 2 big prisons that Israel's got to deal with just from the area of Judea and Samaria since this started. Netanyahu said, listen, if there's a direct attack by Iran against Israel, with defense systems being deployed and on alert, he further states that they are prepared for any scenario, whether that be defense or attack. So this is a problem. So let's get down to the what happened yesterday. Well, I want to do this first. Things are changing in the warfare battle space, and I do think this plays into Bible prophecy. Exactly how, I do not know yet. It's a developing situation. So here's this U.S.-China competition to field drone swarms could fuel a global arms race. There's no could about it. It is fueling a global arms race. And so how these drones are a very big deal, and we saw them used extensively last night. As this article says, this is from the AP, there's a risk China could offer swarm technology to U.S. foes or repressive countries, analysts say, or it could be stolen. Other countries develop in the tech, and look at the countries that they identify in this AP article, such as Russia, Israel, Iran, and Turkey, could also spread the know-how. And this is an issue. Lloyd Austin, he testified in front of Congress the other day, and what he was saying is kind of an interesting development in the Ukraine-Russian war. I don't think Ukraine's going to win this. They're running out of people. Russia has pretty much wrecked the country. Russia's lost a lot of people. I remember everybody telling me, all these experts, everything's going to be done in 2 weeks, back in February of 2022, and here we are over 2 years later, and it's still not done. Russia has made some indications that they might want to resolve the situation. Ukraine says, no, we're not going to do that. We rejected that earlier. But one of the things right now that might be driving Russia to come forward is that Ukraine has been using these drones that they've developed. And they're small, they're portable. They've even put them, according to reports that I've seen, into like backpacks. People take the backpack and they're able to get 1,000 miles into Russia, where Russia does not have a security system, say, around a refinery. And they're able to use those drones to destroy very critical parts of the infrastructure. This is what Iran did when it attacked the the Saudi refinery with drones and missiles a few years ago, which never really got a response from the West. It was the largest refinery in the world. And so some of the refining capacity, and this may translate to higher oil and gas prices here because supply is diminished, they're attacking critical infrastructure in Russia. That's kind of interesting. And so Lloyd Austin was talking in Congress about that. And Russia responds. They're attacking, for example, here's a video of the largest power plant around Kyiv, Ukraine, being destroyed the other day. So they're attacking civilian infrastructure. And that's a big deal. Let's see here. Oh, I'm going to get to that. Hang on a second here. I need to move that to another part of my presentation. So I moved that already. I have a few things we need to talk about yet. Okay. So here we go. So this is what a lot of the pro-Iranian people are saying. We're going to attack Israel. We're going to destroy them. And it's going to look like this. This is a video from a supposedly hypersonic missile. Let me turn the volume down on that. That was going to, they're going to use this type of missile. Israel's not going to be able to resist. It's a ballistic missile. It's a hypersonic. They don't have a defense system for it. And I saw all these pro-Palestinian and really an violently or virulently anti-Israel Twitter accounts of real people in this case. They're like, oh, the Iron Dome's going to be overwhelmed. There was one, she goes by the name Partisan Girl. Rick Wiles of True News has had her on, so you can tell she's very anti-Israel. And she said, this is the greatest day of my life. When everything started last night. I don't know how she feels this morning. I haven't been able to see any tweets from her this morning. So they're saying, this is going to happen. So there were all these missiles that were fired. There were missiles, drones, probably around 350 that were fired. I think I have the stats down here. If I don't have those, I'll just say, Israel, what happened to I forgot to put my slides back up. Uh-oh. I don't like the looks of that. Hang on here. Pull this over to my other screen. My PowerPoint is in the process of crashing here at the moment. In Macworld, if you have this spinning colored wheel, that's bad. And when it's really bad, the wheel's not spinning. I have a non-spinning colored wheel right now. So I'm going to have to shut this down. I think I saved this recently. Okay. So the slides I just moved won't be moved. I can almost guarantee you that. Oh, actually they are. So I'll be... Okay, so all these pro-Palestinian websites, I guess I need to put my slides show up. A lot of attacks, 350. Israel shot down about 99% of everything. It was an unprecedented attack from Iran, and it was an unbelievable response. So very grateful for that. One of the images, though, this is a picture of the Dome of the Rock and the Iranian missiles flying on. And even pro-Iranian, pro-Hamas websites are going, wait, what are they doing firing missiles around our holy site? What if a missile hits that? Well, might solve some of our end-time logistics problems isn't it? Here's a little video from the Washington Post showing some of the missile attacks. My Red Alert app that I used was going off, especially attacks in the Negev, Dead Sea, southern Israel, trying to figure out where these are coming from. And then Brian Schrager, who called me and said, it's unbelievable. I'm sitting here on my, he lives south of Jerusalem, and he goes, there's just tons of missiles and rockets and everything, and they're exploding overhead, and everybody's, you can hear it's sort of like the comments we heard when we saw the eclipse. You see all these things going on, but Iron Dome did great. I think out of everything, there was about 7 ballistic missiles got through. But in the early part of this, there's a guy named Richard Medhurst. He is a radical leftist, pro-Palestinian Hamas lover. I want you to listen to his video. So we now know what happened, right? So when it started, this is what Richard Medhurst had to say.
I'm stunned. I'm surprised. I'm taken aback. And I think the Israelis are feeling a lot more surprised than we are. This is the fact that it was not just Iran, but the entire resistance axis striking this colonial occupation, this illegal occupation, this illegal entity with such force. I mean, we've never seen anything like this in history. It is truly remarkable and unprecedented. It is one of the most defiant acts of resistance in our lifetimes, and this day will be talked about for decades and decades to come. The Israelis and their so-called image of a military power, if it wasn't already destroyed in 2006 or on October 7th, I mean, it's certainly gone out the window today. You just mentioned how more than half the missiles got through the Iron Dome. I'm certain it's a lot more than that. And just before you were showing the various technologies that Iran has developed, I want to remind people that Iran did this under sanctions. So this is thrice as difficult than other countries. And Iran not just developed these defense programs under sanctions, but it exceeded and helped others in the region to defend themselves. And that is truly remarkable and something that has done us proud.
So they're going to talk about this on the left for decades and decades. Now, I personally don't think there are decades and decades. Okay. I'll bet he's not going to be talking about it in the near term. This is embarrassing. And I saw all of these pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, pro-colonialist, leftist, Marxist, all these people. Look at what's happening. Israel's going down. Iron Dome is overwhelmed. It didn't work that way, people. The facts don't match up with anything that you believe on anything in your life. Get a clue. So here's some blogs. This is one. This talks about that, like 170 drones, they shot down 170. There were a number of cruise missiles, they shot down every one of them. There were some ballistic missiles, they got all of them, but about 7. And I believe only 1 landed and caused some damage. Now, Jordan helped shoot some down, and boy, are the people upset with Abdullah. That traitor. So the guy who on Monday said we need a 2-state solution and we need to stop this war in Gaza, he's now a traitor because he shot down some Iranian missiles. There are some soft reports that I've seen that Saudi Arabia may have provided some assistance. And other allies of the U.S. shot down some of these missiles. And people are, a lot of people are really upset. So there's certain lies. There's a guy named Avi Meyer, and he has a pretty good tweet. And he says, these are a few lies you need to not believe anymore. And I'm not going to go through. You can look up his tweet at Twitter, at Avi Meyer. And so here's a few lies. Lie number 1, Israel started this with its airstrike in Damascus. And he says that's false. Iran has been maintaining a constant assault on Israel for decades via its proxies in the regions, attacking embassies all over the world and all these things. And finally, they took out some of the leadership of the IRGC in Damascus. And nobody, the left and the people who hate Israel, they never remember the history. Lie number two, the target of Israel's airstrike in Damascus was a diplomatic facility. That's false. It was not a diplomatic facility. It was being used as a military planning operation, clearly a permissible target under the laws of war. Lie number three, Israel carried out the Damascus airstrike in order to provoke a wider war. They didn't. They took out terrorists in Lebanon. They took out terrorists in Damascus. And they've taken out facilities that are providing terror-related missiles and that type of thing in Damascus and Lebanon and Iran and Iraq and elsewhere. Lie number four, any Israeli response will cause the situation to escalate further. So it's been, over 12 hours now since Israel repelled the attack. Israel hasn't, at least they may have responded. I don't think they're going to respond for a few days. They're going to do what Iran did to Israel. Everybody in Israel was talking this last week. When are they going to attack? What are they going to do? Where's it going to be? What kind of an attack is going to be? How's it going to affect us? Is it going to shut down everything? And everybody was upset, and Iran said this is part of our warfare. It's psychological warfare on the population. So I think Israel's going to let the people in Iran, the leadership, twist a little bit. So lie number five, the relatively limited damage from the Iranian attack means it's no big deal and Israel should let it go. Amir Avivi from the Israeli Defense and Security Forum this morning on a WhatsApp group, IDSF WhatsApp group. By the way, I did interview General Avivi last week, but I just haven't been busy all week. I retired so I could work more. And I just haven't had time to edit that video down. But if you go to the IDSF YouTube channel, you'll see a lot of the same information in the IDSF videos that were put up, including, I think Monday and Wednesday, Amir Avivi was talking, and you should go listen to that, and you should follow that YouTube channel, subscribe to it. They do briefings every day for 30 minutes, Monday through Thursday at, right now they're at 10 a.m. Eastern, U.S. Eastern Time. So this is from, I think from the Washington Post. Iran and Israel shadow war explodes into the open. Good article by Ben Yishai at Ynet News. Historic achievement, a zero of 221 against cruise missiles and drone swarms. This is how they were intercepted. And he goes through a very long article and talks about that. And our government still supports Iran. Now I'm going to play a little bit of a clip of Tucker Carlson. I talked with Olivier Melnick about this. I'm going to do an interview with Dumasani Washington, who's a very pro-Israel black pastor from California, and I can't remember the name of his organization. And that'll be up sometime on Wednesday, probably. He's an excellent defender, apologist for Israel. And so I want you to listen a little bit to what this interview that Tucker Carlson did with Munther Isaac from Bethlehem Bible College. He's a Lutheran pastor in Bethlehem. And this, I'm just going to play a couple minutes of it because if I play any more of it, I'll be too upset to do anything the rest of the day. This, by the way, up front, I will tell you, this is one of the most pathetic anti-Semitic interviews I have ever seen in my life. And Tucker Carlson should be ashamed of himself. Big time. Okay, here's what he says at the beginning.
A consistent but almost never noted theme of American foreign policy is that it is always the Christians who suffer. When there's a war abroad that the United States is funding, it is Christians who tend to die disproportionately. And this goes back a long way, 60 years really, to Vietnam, where Catholics in that country were massacred. But it's accelerated. So, for example, during the more than a decade the U.S. government spent occupying Iraq, the ancient Christian community of Iraq was completely devastated. 9 out of 10 of them are no longer there. They're gone. That was an effect of our foreign policy, but it was almost never noted in the United States and almost never, ever even mentioned by Christian clergy in this country, many of whom supported that war and that occupation. Why is that? Maybe because it wasn't. Virtually no one in any American church said anything when Christians were killed in Syria, very often by Islamic extremists, paid for by the United States. But nobody said anything, and anyone who did was denounced as a kook or a bigot somehow. Standing up for Christians was not allowed in the U.S. media. We saw that firsthand. And so, once again, it continued. In Ukraine, where the U.S. government has sent far more than $100 billion to the Ukrainian government, and what happened? What did that government do? Well, it banned an entire Christian denomination. The Zelensky government is busy throwing Orthodox priests and nuns in jail and having the army raid churches. But again, not a word. But what about Gaza? What about the entire region in the Middle East, where, of course, there's very intense fighting going on? Many Christian churches in the United States, particularly evangelical churches, support that. But there is virtually never a word about the Christians who live there, the ancient Christian community in Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel proper. So, because no one has said a word, there has been great suffering among the Christian population in that region. In October, a Greek Orthodox church in the Gaza Strip was hit by an airstrike. We're showing the video now. The church is in ruins. At least 17 people were killed.
Okay, listen. A lot of what he just said is a complete, total propaganda lie. I'm disgusted by this. Christians care about Christians. I have Christian friends in Bethlehem. They are concerned that the Christian population, when Israel turned over control of Bethlehem to the Palestinian Authority, was about 80% Christian. Today, it's less than 10%. That has nothing to do with Israel, Tucker. Get your facts straight. Stop believing these anti-Semitic propagandistic lies. So Dumisani Washington wrote this article at Tablet Mag. And the title of the article is, let me go in here, The Arsonist. Bravo, Dumisani. That's why I immediately contacted him and said, I want to interview you about this. Tucker Carlson whitewashed murderers to set fire to evangelical Jewish relations. Dumisani is 100% correct on that. And don't send me any email that I misinterpret Tucker and Tucker's our ally on some things. I'm talking about this specific situation. Tucker is dead wrong. Dead wrong. It's propaganda. For example, what he said about Russia, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hate mail about this. This notion on the right that Putin is this great Christian is just beyond my comprehension. I have evangelical pastor friends in Ukraine that I'm in regular contact with. I sent them this interview that Tucker did with Munther. They were appalled, especially the front where he says, Ukraine has shut down a Christian denomination. They have imprisoned some people from the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine. Why? Because they're at war with Russia and they're spies that are working for Russia. This is what happens in wars. And for Tucker to count, and by the way, you'll find more evangelical churches destroyed, people imprisoned in Russia-controlled areas than you will in the rest of Ukraine. Evangelical pastors. So you're going to talk about that, Tucker? You're going to get your facts straight on that? I have a whole report that Ukrainian pastors prepared about what's happened to the church, evangelical church in Ukraine. So listen, I asked my evangelical pastor friends, are you free to share the gospel in Ukraine? Yeah. Yeah, I am. So what's going on? Tucker, I don't understand it. So here's what Dumisani says his interview, or this article, and we'll talk more about this week. Tucker Carlson, a self-described America First commentator, has made it clear on several occasions that given the dire issues in this country is facing, particularly on our southern border, anyone in America overly concerned with what is happening in Israel or anywhere else for that matter is insufficiently patriotic. So that's Tucker's main operative principle. And then Dumasani makes this point. But now Tucker himself has decided to ignore his own advice and dedicate a 40-minute episode of a show to expressing outrage at the actions of a foreign nation. So Tucker, if we can't talk about it, if we're unpatriotic when we talk about it, you're talking about it, but he's couching it in terms of, well, I'm just a good Christian. And he has no understanding of God's plan for Israel or anything. He is totally ignorant on that issue. He may be fine on a lot of things. I've played a lot of clips of his. But you never heard Israel mentioned when he had a show on Fox. And I've had Fox insiders tell me there was a reason for that. And he's like Pat Buchanan was. Remember Pat Buchanan? We love Pat Buchanan's conservatism, but he was very anti-Israel, anti-Jewish. And Tucker is in that mold, I'm sorry to say. And so Dumasani and I will talk about that. And it seems to me that it's hypocritical. So he interviewed this guy named Munter Isaac. Jewish Insider has an article this week. Tucker Carlson's pastor from Bethlehem is the high priest of anti-Semitic Christianity. And here's a little video that Middle East Eye, which is pro-Palestinian, put up about Munter Isaac.
This year, Christmas celebrations are cancelled in Bethlehem, and for obvious reasons. It's impossible to celebrate while our people in Gaza are going through a genocide, when children are being massacred in such a brutal manner. All the heads of churches in Jerusalem decided that Christmas celebrations will be mainly prayers with no festive celebrations. We thought of what is meaning of Christmas for us as Palestinians, and what message do we want to send to the world about the meaning of Christmas today. So we came up with this idea of a manger in the midst of a rubble, resembling a destroyed house in Gaza, and the child Jesus as a child who's under the rubble. We've seen so many images of children being pulled out of the rubble. And
so here's the picture of the manger scene in his church in Bethlehem. Jesus wrapped in a Palestinian keffiyeh. I've met him. He's one of the movers behind Christ at the Checkpoint. I went to this conference. I've talked about it many times. Because I wanted to know what they were saying. They're liberation theologians, Marxist, leftist, radical, replacement theologians. That's what they are. Tucker never asked him a difficult question and let him talk, let him spread his lies, which Jewish Insider says he's the high priest of anti-Semitic Christianity, and I agree with that assessment. I've listened to him speak. I know what he says. I know what he writes. Tucker did not do his research. And there's the baby Jesus wrapped in a Palestinian keffiyeh. Now, if you think back a few years to this visit, 2014, May 2014, Pope Francis going to Bethlehem with, of course, the obligatory tearful prayer at the separation barrier, which Munter Isaac says completely surrounds Bethlehem. It's a total lie. It's a total propaganda lie. It does not. I've been there. It's a fence. It's not a wall. They say a wall. They lie. And this is the Pope in Manger Square doing a mass with this mural behind him. The three wise men are three popes. Paul VI, John Paul II, and Benedict. Mary appears to be next to Joseph there. To Joseph's left, I believe, is Mary. It looks like she's in a burqa. And what do you see? Joseph in a keffiyeh. And there behind the Pope when he's doing his Mass is baby Jesus in a Palestinian keffiyeh, which, by the way, if you tear that apart, it represents fishing nets, and it really sort of brings in that concept of from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Research it, look up Palestinian keffiyeh. This was a disgusting display. I want to give credit to Travis Snow. He teaches on Bible prophecy. I don't know what his orientation is on rapture timing or anything like that. He seems to be a solid guy. I'm sure there's things I disagree with him with. Yeah, I'm sure he disagrees with me. But I want to give him credit because he listened to the interview with Tucker. A friend of mine in Israel is writing an article, said, what do you think of it? And I wrote him, you might find this not hard to believe, I wrote him like 5 pages of stuff. And then I started checking Twitter, and Travis Snow got in a few paragraphs what I spent 5 pages going through. So I want to give him credit for being succinct and to the point, unlike myself. And here's what he said in his tweet. Now I'm going to go through the whole tweet. You've now reached the point, and I've noticed this on the right, this growing anti-Semitism. It's a problem. We need to address it. If we're conservatives and we're on the right, this is a problem. It's there. It's not made up. It's all over Twitter. So we've now reached the point where the right-wing isolationists and nationalists have essentially the same anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic beliefs as left-wing neo-Marxists and Hamas supporters. Can you think of any other issue where the polarization between left and right has dissolved in such a way and led to a more or less unified position? If you know of any, let me know. When it comes to Israel and Jews, I can show you the examples. Go watch Tucker's interview of an anti-Semitic so-called pastor from Bethlehem. Let me put it another way, Travis says. Would Tucker Carlson ever agree with people on the left in regards to abortion, LGBTQ, or the border? Of course not. Then why is he, the archetype of a certain nationalist stream on the right, with whom I actually agree with on many issues, speaking as a nationalist here myself, platforming a pro-Hamas priest and basically articulating the same anti-Zionist narrative as the pro-Hamas leftist protesters who are pushing the LGBTQ agenda in our society? Legitimate question, Tucker. What's your answer? The answer, of course, was revealed by the Hebrew prophets 3,000 years ago. Zechariah 12:2, behold, I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that causes drunken reeling to all the peoples. As we move deeper and deeper into the heart of prophetic history, one's theology of Israel will become more and more important every day. And tragically, huge numbers on the right are currently failing the Israel test. But we also have to take heart in knowing that this has all been foretold and is leading to the consummation of Israel, of God's redemptive plan. Amen to that.
Tucker Carlson continued.
So I'm going to make Tablet Magazine has a podcast with Walter Russell Mead, and they did an episode the other day. Go listen to it. It's about 28 minutes. Czar Tucker and the anti-Semitic right. Starts about 13 minutes in. We'll start the part on Tucker. So I could play it for you now, but I know it's hard to believe I'm over time today. But a very important interview, Walter Russell Mead. Now, he sort of says, well, I don't think there are that many really true anti-Semites and stuff like that. You know, it's Twitter and a lot of fake accounts. I disagree with him. I see it everywhere from real people, and I'm concerned about it. Then he goes on and talks about Russia and the anti-Semitism that's becoming apparent in Russia among the nationalist movement that Putin is feeding off of. And this is true. Russia has always had an anti-Semitism problem. The fake, fabricated protocols of the Elder of Zion came from Tsarist Russia. And it's coming back. You don't think that's true? Here's Alexander Dugin, who is an advisor to Putin, tweeting this week. or in a reference in an article he wrote this week, Jerusalem will be a Russian city, or it will not exist at all. And you can go and find that article. Far-right Russian philosopher Alexander Dugin is fomenting war against Israel. And they go through, this is from a Telegram channel. Dugin, this person who writes on Telegram, a Jewish Russian businessman, Alexander Dugin went completely crazy and declared that the mother of Russian cities is not Kyiv, but Jerusalem. And Israeli diplomats continue to meet with Russian officials and maintain relations, and the implication is they don't really understand what Dugin is saying. And Dugin is influential in Russia, particularly among the nationalist people that form a lot of part of Putin's coalition. So you can go find those articles online. So we have a problem. We have a problem. And I think that I don't know what's going to happen. Israel's going to respond in some way. I don't know when. Might be a few days, might be a week, might be 2 weeks. But first time they were attacked directly from Iranian soil. They are not going to let that go by. They cannot let that go by. Now, a lot of people are talking, well, maybe Israel, if we attack them, we can cause regime change. And this guy, I don't know who this person is, who tweeted, says the police, the IRGC, hold all the guns and control 40 to 50% of the economy. The way Iran is organized, they're sort of like the mafia. I think of this movie that I've watched a couple times called The Godfather. Pam will laugh at that because I'm fascinated by the movie. And they controlled certain neighborhoods and parts of the city, or a borough of the city. And then they controlled drug traffic in all the boroughs, or something else in all the boroughs. Well, this is the way Iran is organized. They give off these big business portfolios to like the IRGC. And so the IRGC controls a fortune of somewhere around $30 to $40 billion. And they use that to fund their operations and their terror operations. Khomeini himself controls a fortune that I've seen estimated at $100 billion, which would make him technically one of the richest people on the planet. And so they give the Iranian Revolutionary Guard control of those parts of the economy, and then they give their allegiance to the regime. But if the regime goes away, you've not gotten rid of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. They're still there, and they may get more power, and they may be worse than the regime. That's what this tweet is saying. And so you see this alliance: Russia, Iran, Syria, Lebanon. It's very interesting to see all this come together. And by the way, I'm talking about it a lot. I mean, we see the BRICS countries trying to put in central bank digital currencies and get rid of the dollar as the world reserve currency. I don't know how quickly they'll be able to make that happen. I think they've got to settle on a currency other than the Chinese yuan, which a lot of people in the BRICS coalition don't really want to be the world reserve currency. But that may come together very quickly, and that will hurt the United States. We live at this time. I've said this many times. Things happen, they're accelerating, they're converging, and they happen gradually, then suddenly. And I think we're really at that time. But that's the way prophetic history goes. But listen, God's in control. I'm really not that worried about it, to be honest with you, because I know how it ends. But there might be painful times for us ahead. That's life. You think other people in the world don't have painful times that they've lived through for, say, thousands of years? We've had it pretty nice here in the West. So I'm just saying, God's in control, trust God, but know that God has a plan. And Israel does, from everything I've read in the Bible, seem to be at the heart of that plan. People like Tucker Carlson do not understand that, or if they know about it, they reject it. And that's a problem. So be very careful out there. let's pray and we'll talk. I could go for a long time, but that's enough. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for giving us the blessing of living at this time and the blessing of your prophetic scriptures. We pray, Lord, that you will make us wise people, guided by the Holy Spirit, discerning, but also able to speak the truth boldly and in love, as we're supposed to do. Help us to have opportunities to share the gospel, and bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.